Some places hold too many ghosts to ever feel like home again. Everett Langford knew this truth when he returned to his Montana ranch after 10 years of running from memories that wouldn't let him rest. He came back to sell the land and leave forever. The ranch held nothing but pain now, just empty rooms where his wife's laughter used to echo. But on his first night back, checking the old barn for drifters, he found something that stopped him cold. A woman sat chained to a wooden post, beaten and barely alive. Her name was Mabel Cortez. The town had given up looking for her weeks ago, figuring she'd just run off. But Everett could see the truth. Someone had put her there on purpose. Someone wanted her to suffer. The question that would change both their lives forever was simple. Who had done this to her and why? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Everett Langford had never intended to become rich. Money had a way of finding him, though, like rain finds the lowest ground. 10 years ago, he'd sold his software company for more millions than a ranch hand from Montana had any right to expect. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd built a fortune helping other people connect through technology, while he himself had been running from every meaningful connection in his life. The wedding ring hanging on a chain around his neck caught the lamplight as he knelt beside the woman in his barn, Sarah's ring. He'd worn it there since the day they buried her, too afraid to put it away and too broken to keep it on his finger where it belonged. The gold was warm against his chest, a constant reminder of the life he'd failed to protect. "Easy now," he whispered to the woman chained to the post. Her dark hair was matted with blood, her clothes torn and stained. She couldn't be more than 30, but the pain in her eyes made her look ancient. "Nobody's going to hurt you anymore." The barn smelled of old hay and motor oil, the same scents that had filled his childhood. His father had built this place with his own hands back in 1962, raising cattle until the drought of '88 drove him to sell most of the herd. Everett had spent countless summer mornings here, mucking stalls and dreaming of anywhere else. Now, 43 years old and successful beyond his wildest teenage aspirations, all he wanted was to be that kid again, back when his biggest worry was whether he'd finish his chores in time to go fishing. Sarah would have known what to do. She always did. The woman Mabel, he'd learned her name was Mabel Cortez, flinched when he reached for the shackles. They were old iron, the kind used for livestock, but modified with a padlock, professional work. Someone had planned this carefully. "I'm going to get you out of here," Everett said, his voice steady despite the rage building in his chest. "Can you tell me who did this?" She shook her head, not in refusal but in fear. Her lips were cracked and swollen, dried blood crusting at the corner of her mouth. Whoever had done this had taken their time with her. Everett stood and walked to his truck, retrieving a bolt cutter from the toolbox. The night air was crisp with the promise of winter, stars sharp and bright in the Montana sky. This was the same sky he and Sarah had laid under on their wedding night. Camping out in the meadow because they were too poor for a honeymoon but too happy to care, she'd pointed out constellations and made up stories about each one, her voice soft and dreamy in the darkness. "That one there," she'd said, tracing Orion with her finger. "That's a cowboy who lost his way home, but see how bright his belt is? That's hope. No matter how lost you get, there's always a light to guide you back." He'd thought about that story 1,000 times over the past decade, usually when he was drunk and feeling sorry for himself. Sarah had been his guiding light. And when she died, he'd lost his way completely. The ranch became a tomb, Montana became a graveyard, and he'd spent 10 years wandering from city to city, building his business empire on the foundation of his grief. The bolt cutters made quick work of the chains. Mabel collapsed the moment her arms were free, and Everett caught her before she hit the ground. She was lighter than she should be, all sharp angles and hollow spaces where proper meals should have filled her out. When was the last time she'd eaten? When was the last time anyone had shown her kindness? "Let's get you inside," he said, lifting her carefully. She didn't resist, too weak to fight even if she'd wanted to. Her head lolled against his shoulder, and he caught a whiff of something that made his stomach turn: infection, fear, and the sour smell of prolonged captivity. The ranch house hadn't changed much since he'd left. Same blue paint peeling on the shutters, same creaky porch boards that announced visitors long before they reached the door. He'd paid a property management company to keep the place from falling down completely, but it still felt abandoned, hollow. Sarah's touch had been everywhere. Once in the flower boxes she'd painted bright yellow, in the herb garden she'd tended with religious devotion, in the way she'd arranged furniture to catch the morning light just right. Now it was just a house, 4 walls and a roof, nothing more. Everett carried Mabel through the front door and into what had been Sarah's sewing room. She'd spent hours in here, working on quilts for their future children, mending his work shirts with careful, precise stitches. The sewing machine still sat in the corner, covered with a sheet like a ghost waiting for resurrection. He laid Mabel on the old couch and covered her with one of Sarah's quilts, a wedding ring pattern in blues and whites that she'd finished just months before the accident. The woman's eyes fluttered open, and for a moment they were lucid, focused. "Thank you," she whispered, and then she was unconscious again. Everett stood in the doorway, looking at this stranger wrapped in his wife's handiwork, and felt something shift inside his chest. It wasn't healing that would take more than one good deed, but it was movement. For the first time in 10 years, he had a purpose beyond running away. The phone rang, startling him from his thoughts. The old rotary phone in the kitchen, the same one his parents had used, the one Sarah had insisted they keep because she liked the way it felt substantial in her hands. "Langford," he answered. "Everett? Jesus, boy, is that really you?" The voice belonged to Doc Henderson, the only doctor in Copper Creek, and a man who'd known Everett since he was knee-high to a grasshopper. "Martha Grimsby saw your truck at the ranch. Thought maybe I was seeing things when she told me, but here you are." "Hello, Doc." Everett glanced back toward the sewing room. "I need you to come out here, tonight, and bring your medical bag. Everything all right? You sound different, tired. I found someone who needs help, a woman. She's been hurt pretty bad." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Doc Henderson had been practicing medicine in Copper Creek for 40 years, and he'd learned when not to ask too many questions over the phone. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, the old man said. "Keep her warm, and don't give her anything to drink until I can examine her." "Doc," Everett caught him before he could hang up, "this stays between us for now. Can you do that?" Another pause. "Son, I've been keeping secrets in this town since before you were born. I'll be there soon." Everett hung up and returned to check on Mabel. She was shivering despite the quilt, her breathing shallow but regular. He built up the fire in the old stone fireplace, the same one his father had built stone by stone during the winter of '63. The warmth began to fill the room, and with it came memories he'd tried to bury. Sarah, curled up on this same couch, reading aloud from books she'd ordered from catalogues. Her voice had been music, turning even the driest passages into something beautiful. She'd read to him every evening after dinner, a habit she'd insisted on because she said it was important for couples to share stories. "We're writing our own story every day," she'd told him once, looking up from a particularly thick novel. "But it's good to remember that other people have walked these paths before us. Love, loss, hope, it's all been felt before, and it'll be felt again long after we're gone. Reading reminds us we're part of something bigger." He'd teased her about being too philosophical for a ranch wife, but the truth was, her words had always made sense to him. Sarah had possessed a wisdom that went beyond her years, a way of seeing connections that escaped most people. She would have understood why he couldn't leave this broken woman in his barn. She would have insisted on helping, just like she'd insisted on feeding every stray cat that wandered onto their property. The sound of a truck engine broke through his reverie. Doc Henderson's old Ford, rumbling up the gravel drive like a mechanical prayer. Everett met him at the front door, noting how the years had stooped the old man's shoulders and thinned his hair to wisps. "Where is she?" Doc asked, setting down his black bag, the same bag he'd carried for decades. "In here." Everett led him to the sewing room. "Her name's Mabel Cortez. I found her chained up in my barn." Doc Henderson's weathered face went stone serious. He knelt beside the couch and began his examination with gentle, practiced hands. Everett watched from the doorway, remembering another night when Doc had knelt beside another woman in this very house. That time, he'd been too late. "How long was she there?" Doc asked, checking Mabel's pulse. "I don't know. Could be days, could be weeks. She's barely conscious." "Someone worked her over real good." Doc's voice carried the weight of a man who'd seen too much cruelty in his lifetime. Broken ribs, dehydration, malnutrition. "These rope burns on her wrists are infected." He looked up at Everett with eyes that had lost their softness long ago. "Son, this woman's been to hell and back. Will she live?" "She'll live, but she's going to need care. Good food, clean water, antibiotics for the infection, and patience. Lots of patience. Trauma like this doesn't heal overnight." Doc Henderson cleaned and bandaged Mabel's wounds while Everett watched, feeling helpless. When the old man finished, he packed up his supplies and fixed Everett with a look that could have cut glass. "I don't suppose you're planning to involve Sheriff Wade in this. Would it do any good?" "Marcus Wade's been sheriff for 3 years now, and he's good at exactly 2 things: collecting his paycheck and looking the other way when it suits certain people." Doc's jaw tightened. "I've got my suspicions about how Miss Cortez ended up in your barn, and none of them involve coincidence." "You think someone put her there on purpose?" "On my property? I think there are people in this county who've gotten comfortable doing whatever they please. And I think a woman like Mabel, young, pretty, probably undocumented, makes an easy target." Doc stood, his knees creaking like old hinges. "The question is, what are you planning to do about it?" Everett looked at Mabel, sleeping peacefully for the first time in who knew how long. Sarah's quilt rose and fell with her breathing, and in the firelight she looked almost peaceful, almost safe. "I'm going to take care of her," he said, "however long it takes." "That's what I hoped you'd say." Doc headed for the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, Everett, Sarah would be proud of you tonight. This is exactly what she would have done." After Doc left, Everett sat in his father's old chair, watching over Mabel as she slept. The fire crackled in the hearth, and outside the wind picked up, rattling the windows like restless spirits. This house had been empty for 10 years, but tonight it felt alive again. Wounded maybe, but alive. He touched the ring hanging around his neck, feeling Sarah's presence in the room like a whisper of warmth. She'd always believed that everything happened for a reason, that the universe had a way of putting people where they needed to be when they needed to be there. "Is this why you brought me home?" he asked the darkness. "To save her, or to save myself?" The fire popped, sending sparks up the chimney, and for just a moment Everett could have sworn he heard Sarah's laughter in the sound, soft and musical, the way it had been when she was truly happy. The way it had been on their wedding night when she'd pointed out constellations and told him about cowboys finding their way home. Maybe, just maybe, his wandering days were finally over. Dawn came slow and grey over the Montana mountains, painting the sky the colour of old pewter. Everett woke in his father's chair, neck stiff and back aching, to find Mabel sitting up on the couch, staring at him with dark eyes that held more wariness than gratitude. "You're awake," he said, stretching the kinks from his spine. "How do you feel?" She didn't answer immediately, just studied his face as if trying to decide whether he was friend or foe. Her hand moved unconsciously to her ribs, where Doc Henderson had wrapped the worst of her injuries. "Where am I?" "My ranch. About 15 miles outside Copper Creek." Everett stood slowly, keeping his movements deliberate and non-threatening. "I'm Everett Langford. I found you in my barn last night." "The barn." She closed her eyes, and he watched her shoulders begin to shake. How long was I? I don't know. But you're safe now. Safe! She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Nobody's safe, not as long as they... She stopped herself, pressing her lips together as if the words might escape and doom them both. Everett moved to the kitchen and returned with a glass of water and a slice of bread. Doc Henderson had said to start with small amounts, see what her stomach could handle. "Can you tell me your name?" he asked, though he already knew. Mabel Cortez. She accepted the water with trembling hands. You shouldn't have brought me here. You don't understand what you've gotten yourself into. Then help me understand. She shook her head, tears starting to spill down her cheeks. They'll kill you. They'll kill us both if they find out you helped me. Before Everett could respond, she was digging frantically in her torn jacket pocket. Her fingers found something, and she pulled it out with desperate care, a photograph, creased and stained but still intact. She held it against her chest like a talisman. "What's that?" Everett asked, gently. Slowly, as if the movement caused her physical pain, Mabel turned the photograph toward him. It showed a woman who might have been beautiful if not for the exhaustion in her eyes. Mabel herself, but younger, healthier. Beside her stood a little girl, maybe 8 years old, with the same dark hair and enormous smile. "My daughter," Mabel whispered. "Elena." The child's face was pure joy, gap-toothed and radiant, the kind of smile that could light up a room. She wore a yellow dress that had seen better days, but was clean and carefully mended. In her arms, she clutched a stuffed rabbit, worn and loved, its fur rubbed thin from countless nights of comfort. "She's beautiful," Everett said, and meant it. "Where is she now?" "I don't know." The words came out broken, each syllable a fresh wound. "They took her. That's why I couldn't run, couldn't fight back too hard. They said if I tried to escape, if I caused trouble, they'd hurt her." Everett felt something cold settle in his stomach. Who took her? Men with money, men with power. Mabel's grip tightened on the photograph. "They said she was better off with them, that I wasn't fit to be a mother. They said lots of things." "How long ago?" 3 months, maybe 4. "Time gets confused when you're..." She gestured vaguely at her injuries. "When they keep you like an animal." The sound of a truck engine interrupted them, and Mabel went rigid with terror. Everett moved to the window and cursed under his breath. A county sheriff's cruiser was pulling up the drive, dust plume trailing behind it like a brown flag of trouble. "It's Sheriff Wade," Everett said. "Stay calm. Don't say anything unless I tell you to." "He's one of them," Mabel whispered, so quietly he almost missed it. The knock on the door came hard and official. Everett took a deep breath and opened it to find Sheriff Marcus Wade, standing on his porch, hat in his hands, and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Wade was a big man, soft around the middle in the way of someone who'd traded physical work for a desk job. His uniform was crisp and his boots were polished, but there was something oily about him that reminded Everett of a used car salesman. "Well, well," Wade said. "Everett Langford, back from the dead. Heard you were in town, but didn't quite believe it." "Marcus." Everett kept his voice neutral. "What brings you out here?" "Oh, just making rounds. You know how it is, big empty house like this, been sitting vacant for years. Sometimes attracts the wrong sort of element." Wade's eyes darted past Everett, trying to see into the house. "Mind if I come in? Catch up on old times?" "Actually, I do mind. I'm pretty tired from the drive up from Denver." Wade's smile faltered slightly. "Denver, huh? Heard you made quite a fortune down there. Tech business, wasn't it?" "Something like that." "Must be nice. Having that kind of money. Must open a lot of doors." Wade put his hat back on, adjusting the brim with deliberate care. "Course, sometimes money can cause problems too. Attracts attention from people you might not want to meet." The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Everett felt his jaw tighten. "I'll keep that in mind," he said. You do that. Wade started to turn away, then stopped, as if remembering something. Oh, speaking of attention, you haven't seen anything unusual around here, have you? We had a report of some vagrant activity in the area. Mexican woman, probably illegal, might be hiding out in barns or sheds. Can't say that I have. Well, if you do see anything, you give me a call right away. Woman like that, no telling what kind of diseases she might be carrying, or what kind of trouble she might bring to honest folks. Wade's eyes were flat and cold. Be a shame if something bad happened to someone just trying to help. After Wade left, Everett returned to find Mabel huddled in the corner of the couch, the photograph pressed against her heart. "He knows," she whispered. "He knows I'm here. Maybe, but knowing and proving are different things. You don't understand. Sheriff Wade, he's the one who brought me to them in the first place." The words hit Everett like a physical blow. "What?" "6 months ago, I went to him for help. Elena and we were staying at a shelter in town. There were men bothering me, following me, making threats. I thought," she laughed bitterly, "I thought the sheriff would help. What happened? He said he'd look into it. Next thing I knew, I woke up in a basement somewhere, chained to a pipe. They kept me there for weeks, bringing me out whenever they—" She stopped, unable to continue. "And Elena? They told me she was in a nice home, with a family who could take care of her properly. They said if I was good, if I did what they wanted, I might see her again someday." Tears were flowing freely now, but I knew they were lying. I knew she was probably. "Don't," Everett said firmly. "Don't think that way. She's alive, and we're going to find her." Mabel looked at him as if he'd lost his mind. "There's no we. You need to take me to the bus station and forget you ever saw me. These people, they don't just hurt you, they destroy everything you care about." "I don't have anything left to care about," Everett said quietly, "except maybe this." He moved to the mantelpiece and picked up a framed photograph, Sarah on their wedding day, radiant in a simple white dress, laughing at something just outside the camera's view. The picture had sat in the same spot for 10 years, gathering dust while he ran from his grief. "My wife," he said, showing Mabel the photograph. "Sarah. She died in an accident 10 years ago, right here on this ranch. I've been running ever since, but I think maybe I'm tired of running." Mabel studied Sarah's face, seeing something there that made her expression soften. "She was beautiful," she said. "She was good. Better than I deserved." Everett set the photograph back in its place. She believed in helping people, in standing up for what's right, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. "She'd want you to help me. She'd want me to help your daughter." For a long moment, they sat in silence, two broken people connected by circumstance and a shared understanding of loss. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows and sending leaves skittering across the porch. "They'll come for me," Mabel said finally. "Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but they'll come. Then we better be ready for them." Mabel looked at him with something that might have been hope, if hope could be mixed with so much fear. "You really think we can find her?" "Find Elena?" Everett touched the ring hanging around his neck, feeling Sarah's presence in the room like a warm hand on his shoulder. "I think we're going to try." 3 days passed before Everett found the journal. He'd been cleaning out Sarah's old desk, looking for anything that might help him understand how to care for someone as damaged as Mabel, when his fingers found the leather-bound book wedged behind a drawer that hadn't been opened in a decade. Sarah's handwriting flowed across the pages in her careful script, each entry dated and thoughtful. He'd known she kept a journal she'd written in it every night before bed, but he'd never read it, respecting her privacy even in death. Now, sitting in the afternoon light streaming through the kitchen window, he felt like he was discovering a part of his wife he'd never known. The entry from March 15th, 3 months before the accident, stopped him cold. Asterisk, Everett found another stray cat today, half-starved thing hiding under the porch. He wanted to call the shelter, said we couldn't save every lost creature in Montana. But I told him what Mama always told me. You can't save everybody, but you can save somebody. And sometimes saving somebody else is how you save yourself. He grumbled about it, but he's already building a shelter for her in the barn. My stubborn, soft-hearted cowboy. Asterisk. Everett closed his eyes, remembering that cat. Patches. Sarah had named her, for the calico markings around her eyes. The animal had lived with them for 2 years, following Sarah around the ranch like a devoted shadow. After the accident, Patches had disappeared, as if she understood that the heart of the home had been torn away. You can't save everybody, but you can save somebody. Sarah's mother's words passed down like a family heirloom. Sarah had lived by that philosophy, always taking in strays, animals, people, anyone who needed a safe place to heal. A knock at the front door interrupted his reading. Through the window he saw Martha Grimsby standing on his porch, her grey hair pulled back in the same severe bun she'd worn since he was a boy. Martha ran the post office and the town's gossip network with equal efficiency, and her presence here meant word was spreading about his return. "Martha," he said, opening the door but not inviting her in, "what can I do for you?" "Everett Langford. You look like you've been living rough." Her sharp eyes tried to peer past him into the house. "Heard you were back in town. Thought I'd bring you some of my famous apple pie, welcome you home proper." The pie in her hands smelled wonderful, but Everett knew it came with strings attached. Martha's kindness always had a price. "That's thoughtful of you." "Course, folks are talking, wondering why you'd come back after all these years, especially with winter coming on." She shifted the pie to one arm and adjusted her purse. "Some say you're planning to sell the place finally. Others think maybe you've got yourself mixed up in some kind of trouble." "What kind of trouble?" "Well, Sheriff Wade mentioned he saw lights on here the other night. Said there might be squatters or worse hiding out. You know how these illegals are, they'll break into any place that looks empty." The word illegals came out of her mouth like she was spitting something distasteful. Everett felt his temper rise, but kept his voice level. "I haven't seen any squatters." "That's good to hear. Course, if you did see something suspicious, I'm sure you'd do the right thing. Call the sheriff. Let him handle it proper." Martha's smile was sharp as a blade. "Wouldn't want you getting mixed up with the wrong sort of people. Man, with your money, your reputation, why, you could lose everything if you weren't careful." After Martha left, Everett returned to the journal, his hands shaking slightly with suppressed anger. How had his hometown become a place where kindness was suspicious and cruelty was just good sense? He found his answer in another entry, dated just a week before Sarah's death. Asterisk. "Met a woman at the grocery store today, Maria Santos. She's got 2 little ones, and her husband was deported last month. She's trying to keep the family together, working 3 jobs, but she's scared. People in town are saying ugly things, treating her like she's some kind of criminal. I invited her to church, told her she had friends here, but she just shook her head. 'Mrs. Langford,' she said, 'good people like you are getting harder to find.' I think she's right. Sometimes I look around this town and wonder what happened to the place I grew up in." Asterisk. Everett set the journal down and walked to the sewing room, where Mabel was sitting by the window, staring out at the mountains. She'd been quiet for 3 days, eating little and speaking less. Doc Henderson said it was normal. Trauma victims often withdrew into themselves while their minds tried to process what they'd endured. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Stronger." Her voice was still hoarse, but there was more life in it than before. "Your friend, the doctor, he's a good man." "He is. One of the few left, according to my wife." Mabel turned from the window. "She wrote about people like me, didn't she? In her journal. You saw me reading it? The way you looked when you came in here, like you'd seen a ghost." Mabel managed a small smile. "What did she say?" Everett thought about the entries he'd read. Sarah's growing concern about the way the town was changing, her worry that good people were becoming scarce. She said that sometimes saving somebody else is how you save yourself. Smart woman. Mabel looked back out the window. But what if the somebody you're trying to save is already broken beyond repair? Are you? She was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing the pattern on Sarah's quilt. I used to sing to Elena every night, she said finally. Lullabies. My grandmother taught me old songs from Mexico about butterflies and flowers and little girls who were brave enough to chase away monsters. Her voice broke slightly. Now I can't remember the words. They took that from me, too. They'll come back, Everett said. The words, the memories, they'll come back when you're ready. How can you be so sure? Because you're here. You survived what they did to you, and that takes more strength than most people have. If you can survive that, you can survive anything. A truck rumbled up the drive, and Mabel tensed instantly. But this wasn't the sheriff's cruiser, it was Hank Morrison's battered Ford, and the man himself was climbing out of the cab, his face grim beneath the brim of his Stetson. Hank had been Everett's father's closest friend, a neighboring rancher who'd always treated Everett like family. He was in his 70s now, stooped and weathered, but his eyes were still sharp as flint. Hank, Everett said, stepping onto the porch. Good to see you. Wish I could say the same. Son. Hank's voice carried a weight that made Everett's stomach drop. We need to talk. Privately. They walked to the barn, where Hank stopped and removed his hat, running gnarled fingers through what remained of his grey hair. I don't know what you've gotten yourself mixed up in, he said, but word's going around that you're harboring someone you shouldn't be, someone the sheriff's looking for. People talk. They do more than talk, Everett. They act. And the people who run this county now, they don't much care for folks who don't follow the rules. What rules? The unwritten kind. The kind that say you mind your own business and don't ask questions about things that don't concern you. Hank's eyes were troubled. I liked your daddy, and I loved Sarah like she was my own daughter. That's why I'm here to tell you to be careful. Careful of what? Hank glanced toward the house, where Mabel's silhouette was visible in the sewing room window. There are men in this county with money and connections. They've got businesses that thrive when people look the other way, and they don't appreciate interference. He put his hat back on, adjusting it with the practiced motion of a lifetime. Whatever you're thinking of doing, son, don't. Pack up that woman and get her somewhere else. Somewhere far from here. And if I don't? Hank's weathered face was deeply sad. Then you might join Sarah sooner than you planned. After Hank left, Everett sat on the porch steps, watching the sun sink behind the mountains. The journal lay open beside him, Sarah's words a reminder of the kind of person she'd been, the kind of person she'd wanted him to be. Inside the house, Mabel was humming, just barely audible through the window, but unmistakable. It wasn't a complete melody yet, just fragments of something half-remembered, but it was a start. You can't save everybody, he said to the gathering darkness, but you can save somebody. The first stars appeared in the Montana sky, bright and steady. Somewhere out there, a little girl named Elena was waiting for someone to be brave enough to chase away the monsters. Everett touched the ring around his neck and made his choice. The rabbit came to Mabel in pieces, first just the memory of its soft fur, then the way Elena had carried it everywhere, one ear more chewed than the other, from nervous nibbling during thunderstorms. By the fourth day at the ranch, she could see it clearly in her mind. Grey and white patches, button eyes that had been replaced twice, a pink nose that Elena had kissed so often it was nearly rubbed away. Tell me about the rabbit, Everett said as they sat in the kitchen, sharing breakfast. He'd noticed how Mabel's fingers moved sometimes, as if she was stroking something that wasn't there. Conejito, she said softly. Little rabbit. My grandmother made it for Elena when she was 3. Taught me how to sew the patches when it got torn. Her hands moved in the air, showing him the size. Elena said he was magic, that he could chase away bad dreams. Sounds like he was good at his job. Too good, maybe. The night they came for us, Elena was sleeping with Conejito in her arms. She wouldn't let go, even when Mabel's voice caught. They let her keep him. said it would help her adjust to her new family. Everett set down his coffee cup carefully. New family? That's what they called it. Said she was going to live with people who could give her things I never could. Nice clothes, good schools, a big house. Tears started in her eyes. They weren't wrong. I couldn't give her those things. But I could give her love. I could give her songs and stories and all the time in the world. That's worth more than money. Is it? When you can't afford medicine when she's sick? When you can't buy her new shoes when hers wear out? Mabel wiped her face with the back of her hand. Sometimes I think maybe they were right. Maybe she is better off. Do you really believe that? No. The word came out fierce and immediate. No, I don't, because I know who these people are now. I know what they do. Everett's lawyer friend James Chen had called the night before with preliminary information. What he'd found made Everett's blood run cold. A network of wealthy families who adopted children from vulnerable mothers, always with hefty fees involved, always with paperwork that somehow bypassed normal channels. James thinks he might have a lead, Everett said carefully. A private adoption agency that's been flagged by federal investigators, off-the-books placements, mostly immigrant children. Mabel's hands went still. You mean? I mean we might be able to find her. Before Mabel could respond, the sound of vehicles outside made them both freeze. Multiple engines, moving fast up the gravel drive. Everett moved to the window and cursed under his breath. Two black SUVs with tinted windows, the kind of vehicles that screamed money and menace in equal measure. Back room now, he told Mabel. Lock the door, and don't come out no matter what you hear. She didn't argue, just grabbed Elena's photograph and disappeared into the hallway. Everett checked his father's old rifle, kept loaded in the front closet since he was a teenager. The weight of it felt familiar in his hands, muscle memory from years of hunting with his dad. The knock came hard and authoritative. When Everett opened the door, he found himself facing three men in expensive suits that didn't quite hide the bulges of shoulder holsters. The leader was tall and thin, with silver hair and the kind of smile that never reached the eyes. Mr. Langford, my name is Vincent Caldwell. I believe you have something that belongs to me. I doubt that. A woman, Mexican, about 30, dark hair. She's been missing from her workplace for several days, and we're concerned about her welfare. Caldwell's smile widened. She has a history of mental illness, you see. Delusions, paranoia. Sometimes she runs off and gets confused about where she belongs. Haven't seen anyone like that. May we come in? Just to have a quick look around, put our minds at ease. No. The smile finally slipped from Caldwell's face. Mr. Langford, I don't think you understand the situation here. The woman we're looking for is dangerous to herself and others. She's made serious allegations against respected members of this community, accusations that could damage innocent reputations. Sounds like a job for the police. The police have already determined that her claims lack credibility. Sheriff Wade briefed us personally on her condition. Caldwell stepped closer, and Everett could smell expensive cologne mixed with something uglier underneath. We're offering a substantial reward for information leading to her safe return. $50,000, cash. Everett felt the rifle's weight in his hands, hidden behind the doorframe. That's a lot of money for someone who's just confused. We care about our employees, even the troubled ones. Employees. Everett let the word hang in the air. What kind of business are you in, Mr. Caldwell? Import and export. We provide services to people who need help navigating complex situations. The smile was back, cold as winter steel. Speaking of which, I understand you've recently come into considerable wealth. Technology sector, wasn't it? Amazing how quickly fortunes can be made and lost. The threat was clear enough. Everett stepped back slightly, bringing the rifle into view, but not quite pointing it at anyone. I think this conversation's over. Caldwell's eyes flicked to the weapon, and his expression hardened. Mr. Langford, you strike me as an intelligent man, intelligent enough to know that some problems are bigger than good intentions. I hope you'll consider what's best for everyone involved. I'll keep that in mind. After the SUVs left, trailing dust and menace, Everett found Mabel curled up in the back bedroom, clutching the photograph and shaking. She looked up at him with eyes wide with terror. "They found me," she whispered. "They suspected, but they don't know for sure." Everett sat down carefully on the edge of the bed. "Mabel, I need to know exactly what these people did to you. All of it." "I can't." "You can. Because if we're going to find Elena, if we're going to stop them, I need to understand what we're fighting." She was quiet for a long time, staring at her daughter's smiling face in the photograph. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady, despite the tears. "They run a business. Rich families who want children but can't have them, or who want them without questions asked. They find women like me, no papers, no family, no one who'll be believed if we try to tell the truth. How many women? I don't know. Dozens, maybe more. They keep us in different places, bring us together sometimes for meetings with potential clients." Her hands clenched into fists. "The clients get to choose, like we're livestock at auction. And the children? Sold to families who pay top dollar for healthy kids with no legal complications. The younger the better." Mabel's voice broke. "Elena was perfect for them. Smart, beautiful, only 8 years old." Everett felt rage building in his chest, hot and clean and righteous. Sarah's journal had taught him that sometimes saving somebody else was how you saved yourself, but sometimes it was simpler than that. Sometimes it was just the right thing to do. "We're going to get her back," he said. "How?" "They have money, connections, the sheriff. They don't have something I have." "What's that?" Everett thought about his father, who'd built this ranch with nothing but determination and sweat. About Sarah, who'd believed that one person could make a difference if they were brave enough to try. About a little girl somewhere clutching a worn, stuffed rabbit and wondering if anyone was coming to save her. "Nothing left to lose," he said. The attack came at 2 in the morning, just when Everett's military training told him it would. He'd served 2 tours in Afghanistan before Sarah, before the ranch called him home, and some lessons you never forgot, like how predators preferred the deep hours when their prey was most vulnerable. He was already moving when the motion sensors he'd installed around the property triggered, rolling out of his father's old chair where he'd been dozing and grabbing the rifle from beside the fireplace. 3 years in the army had taught him to wake up ready for war. "Mabel," he called softly toward the sewing room. "Company's coming." She appeared in the doorway, fully dressed despite the hour. Smart woman, she'd learned to sleep, ready to run. "How many?" 4, maybe 5, coming from the south pasture. Everett moved to the window, peering through the curtains. Dark shapes moved between the trees, professional in their spacing and approach. Not local thugs, these men had training. "What do? We make them regret coming here." Everett had spent the past 2 days preparing for this possibility. The ranch house sat on a small rise with good sightlines in all directions, and he knew every inch of the ground. His father had taught him to hunt these hills before he was 10 years old, and the army had taught him how to make that knowledge deadly. He led Mabel to the root cellar, a stone-lined space beneath the kitchen that his grandmother had used for storing preserves. Now it held emergency supplies, a radio, and a backup exit that led to a culvert running under the ranch road. "If something happens to me," he said, pressing a cell phone into her hands, "you call this number, James Chen, my lawyer. He knows what to do. Nothing's going to happen to you. Maybe not. But if it does, you keep looking for Elena. You don't give up, no matter what." Mabel gripped his hand with surprising strength. "They taught me something in that basement, something I forgot until now." "What's that?" "How to hate." Her dark eyes were fierce in the cellar's dim light. "I spent so long being scared, being broken, that I forgot I could be angry too. These men, they think they can take whatever they want because nobody will stop them. We're going to stop them. Damn right we are. Everett left her there and moved through the house like a ghost, using the shadows and furniture for cover. The first man came through the back door, lock-picked with professional skill, moving with the confidence of someone who'd done this before. He never saw the rifle butt that dropped him unconscious to the kitchen floor. The second man was smarter, coming through the front with his weapon drawn, but smart wasn't the same as familiar with the terrain. The loose floorboard near the entrance that Everett had been meaning to fix for 20 years caught him off guard, and the half-second stumble was all the opening needed. The man went down hard, his head connecting with the stone hearth with a sound like a melon dropping. Numbers 3 and 4 came together, coordinated and careful. They'd found their unconscious partner and knew the game had changed. Everett heard them whispering, regrouping, probably calling for backup. Time was running out. He moved to the barn, using the covered walkway his father had built to protect against Montana winters. The familiar smell of hay and motor oil brought back memories of childhood, but now it was mixed with something else, the metallic tang of adrenaline and approaching violence. The third man came through the barn's side door, sweeping with a pistol and tactical flashlight. Professional gear, professional movement. These weren't Sheriff Wade's local deputies, they were hired specialists, the kind of men who solved problems for people like Vincent Caldwell. Everett waited until the man passed beneath the hayloft, then dropped down behind him. 20 years of soft living had added weight to his frame, but muscle memory was stronger than age. The sleeper hold he'd learned in Army combatives training worked just as well in a Montana barn as it had in Afghan caves. "That's 3, he whispered to the unconscious man, then moved toward the main door where he'd heard the fourth attacker moving. But the fourth man was gone, and so was the black SUV he'd arrived in. Either he'd decided the job wasn't worth the risk, or he was going for reinforcements. Neither option was particularly comforting. Everett zip-tied the 3 unconscious men and dragged them to the barn, then returned to collect Mabel from the cellar. She emerged looking shaken but determined, still clutching Elena's photograph. "Is it over?" "This part is. But they'll be back, probably with more men." Everett moved to the kitchen phone and dialed Doc Henderson's number. The old man answered on the second ring, voice alert despite the hour. "Doc, it's Everett. I need you to come out here, but be careful. There might be more trouble coming." "What happened?" "Nothing I can't handle. But I've got 3 men here who are going to need medical attention before I turn them over to the state police." "State police? Not Sheriff Wade?" "Especially not Sheriff Wade." There was a pause on the other end. "I'll be there in 30 minutes. And Everett?" While they waited for Doc, Everett searched the attackers' pockets. No identification, but they carried high-end equipment, night vision goggles, tactical radios, weapons that cost more than most people made in a year. Someone was spending serious money to get Mabel back. "They really want me dead." "Don't they?" she said, watching him inventory the gear. "They want you quiet." "There's a difference." "Is there?" "Because from where I'm sitting, the outcome looks the same." Everett thought about that as he secured the weapons in his gun safe. She wasn't wrong. Caldwell's people wouldn't keep coming with increasing force if they just wanted to silence her. They wanted her gone permanently, which meant she knew something that threatened their entire operation. "What aren't you telling me?" he asked. Mabel was quiet for a long moment, studying Elena's photograph in the firelight. "There's a list," she said finally. "Names, addresses, amounts paid. I memorized part of it while they had me. Clients, suppliers, officials who've been bought." She looked up at him with haunted eyes. "There's a state senator on that list, a federal judge, people who could shut down any investigation before it starts. How much of it do you remember? Enough to destroy them, if anyone will listen." Doc Henderson's truck rumbled up the drive, headlights cutting through the pre-dawn darkness. As Everett went to meet him, he felt the weight of what they were up against settling on his shoulders like a yoke. These weren't just local criminals or corrupt small-town officials. This was organized, well-funded, and connected all the way to the top. But they'd made a mistake coming here. They'd brought their war to a place where Everett knew every rock, every tree, every shadow, and more importantly, they'd underestimated what a man with nothing left to lose could do when he decided to stop running. Sarah's ring felt warm against his chest as he opened the door for Doc Henderson. Somewhere out there, a little girl was waiting for someone to be brave enough to find her. The war had started, and Everett intended to finish it. The state police arrived at dawn, 2 detectives in an unmarked sedan who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. Detective Ray Morrison, no relation to Hank despite the name, was a lean man with tired eyes, who listened to Everett's story with the expression of someone who'd heard too many lies to believe in truth anymore. His partner, Detective Lisa Torres, took notes but kept glancing at her watch like she had somewhere more important to be. "So you're telling me," Morrison said, studying the 3 zip-tied men Doc Henderson had patched up in the barn, "that these individuals broke into your home with the intention of kidnapping a woman who may or may not be here illegally? I'm telling you, they broke into my home with weapons and ill intent. What happens after that is your job to figure out. And where is this alleged victim now?" Everett had hidden Mabel in the old storm shelter behind the house, a concrete bunker his grandfather had built during the Cold War. She'd gone willingly, understanding that the fewer people who could place her at the ranch, the better. "What victim?" Torres looked up from her notebook. "Mr. Langford, we have reports from Sheriff Wade that you may be harboring an individual wanted for questioning in connection with several serious crimes." "What crimes?" "Theft, fraud, making false statements to law enforcement." Torres's voice was flat, professional. "The alleged victim has a history of mental illness and drug use. Her claims lack credibility." "Whose claims?" Morrison sighed and rubbed his forehead. "Look, Mr. Langford, I'll be straight with you. We've got 3 unconscious men, no clear evidence of breaking and entering since you admit you didn't see them force entry, and a story that sounds like something out of a movie. Without the supposed victim here to corroborate your account, this looks like assault and battery. They had lockpicks, professional weapons, night vision equipment. Could be security contractors hired to locate a missing person. Happens all the time with bail jumpers, custody disputes, missing persons cases." Morrison stood, brushing dust off his jacket. "I'm going to cut you a break here because of your military service and your reputation in the community. But if I were you, I'd be very careful about who I associate with and what stories I choose to believe." After the detectives left with their prisoners, Doc Henderson stayed behind to help clean up. The old man had been unusually quiet during the police interview, but now his weathered face showed deep concern. "They're not going to do anything," Doc said, stating the obvious. "I know. This goes deeper than just local corruption. Those detectives, they're good people, but they're getting pressure from above." "How far above?" Doc was quiet for a moment, then walked to the window overlooking the valley. "You remember Judge Patricia Hayworth? Federal judge, right? Appointed about 5 years ago? She's on Mabel's list, isn't she?" Everett didn't answer directly, but Doc's nod said he didn't need to. "Patricia and I went to high school together. Been friends for 40 years. Last month she called me, said she was having trouble sleeping, stress-related issues. Wanted something to help with anxiety." Doc's voice dropped. "She mentioned feeling compromised, said there were cases coming across her desk that made her sick to her stomach, but she felt powerless to do anything about them. Adoption cases, among others. Family court has jurisdiction over custody matters, but federal court handles immigration issues, citizenship questions, cases that cross state lines." Doc turned from the window. "Patricia's not a bad person, Everett, but she has grandchildren, a husband with health problems. Sometimes good people get backed into corners." Everett retrieved Mabel from the storm shelter, and together they sat in the kitchen while she recited the names she'd memorized during her captivity. The list was longer and more damaging than he'd expected. 3 state senators, a federal judge, 2 county sheriffs, the director of a major adoption agency, and at least a dozen wealthy families who'd paid premium prices for private adoptions. "How did you see all this?" Everett asked. "They kept the records in the basement where they held us. Vincent Caldwell, he's proud of his organization. He likes to show off, especially when he's drunk." Mabel's voice was steady now, focused. "He brought clients down sometimes, let them see the merchandise before they made their final decisions. He'd pull out this leather binder, show them testimonials, success stories, satisfied customers. And you memorized it. I had nothing else to do for 3 months except watch and listen and remember every detail that might help me find Elena." Her fingers traced patterns on the kitchen table. "There's something else, though. Something that might be more important than the list." "What?" "There's going to be an auction next week in Denver. High-end clients only. Private event at some fancy hotel." Mabel looked up at him with eyes that held both hope and terror. "Elena's going to be there." The words hit Everett like a physical blow. "How do you know?" "Because Caldwell was bragging about her, said he had a special item coming up, a beautiful little girl with perfect English and excellent manners. 8 years old, healthy, smart. Ideal for a family wanting to make a discreet addition to their household." Discreet addition. That's what they call it. Rich people who want children but don't want to deal with legal adoptions, background checks, waiting periods. They pay cash, no questions asked, and get a child who's been trained to be grateful and obedient. Everett felt rage building in his chest, hot and clean and righteous, but beneath the anger was something else, determination hardened into steel resolve. "Do you know where in Denver?" "The Grand Metropolitan Hotel, October 15th, private dining room." Mabel's voice was barely above a whisper. "They call it a charity auction, raising money for children's causes. The cruel irony isn't lost on any of us. That's 3 days from now. 3 days to save my daughter." She looked at him with desperate hope. "Can we do it? Can we really get her back?" Everett thought about the resources arrayed against them: money, political connections, corrupt law enforcement, professional killers. Then he thought about a little girl clutching a worn, stuffed rabbit, waiting for someone to come save her. "We can try." Try might not be enough. Then we better make sure it is. Outside, storm clouds were building over the mountains, promising the kind of weather that could shut down roads and ground aircraft. But it could also provide cover for 2 people determined to crash a party they hadn't been invited to. Everett touched Sarah's ring, feeling her presence in the room like a warm hand on his shoulder. She'd always believed that ordinary people could do extraordinary things when they had no other choice. It was time to prove her right. James Chen arrived at the ranch that afternoon, driving a rental car that looked out of place on the gravel road. Everett's lawyer friend had been working the phones for 48 hours straight, and it showed in the dark circles under his eyes and the grim set of his mouth. "We have a problem," James said without preamble, setting his briefcase on the kitchen table. "Actually, we have several problems, but one of them might also be our solution. Talk to me." James opened the briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. "I've been digging into the adoption agency that's been flagged by federal investigators, Bright Future Children's Services. On paper, it looks legitimate. Proper licensing, good references, even some genuine success stories. But underneath, it's rotten to the core." "How rotten?" "They've facilitated over 300 private adoptions in the past 5 years. Each one involved substantial cash payments, expedited paperwork, and children whose backgrounds are difficult to verify." James pulled out photographs, wealthy families posing with children who looked nothing like their new parents. "The FBI has been building a case, but every time they get close, evidence disappears or witnesses recant their statements." Mabel studied the photographs with growing recognition. "I've seen some of these children in the basement before they went to their new homes. Which brings us to our biggest problem. James pulled out another document, this one marked with official seals. Senator Michael Brennan sits on the Senate Judiciary Committee. He's been blocking federal funding for anti-trafficking investigations and pushing legislation that would reduce oversight of private adoption agencies. Everett recognized the name immediately. He's on Mabel's list. He's not just on the list, he's the list's biggest customer. James's voice was grim. Senator Brennan and his wife have adopted 4 children through Bright Future over the past 3 years. All cash transactions, all expedited approvals. 4 children. Mabel's voice was hollow. I remember now. Mrs. Brennan came to the basement twice. She was very particular, very demanding, wanted to see the children walk, talk, perform little tasks. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. They weren't just fighting local corruption or even state-level officials. They were up against a United States senator with the power to shut down federal investigations. But here's the twist, James continued. Senator Brennan's wife doesn't know where the children really come from. What do you mean? Margaret Brennan is a genuine child advocate. She spent 20 years working with legitimate charities, funding orphanages, supporting foster care reform. She believes she's saving these children from poverty and abuse through legal adoption. James pulled out a newspaper clipping showing the senator's wife at a charity event, surrounded by children. She has no idea her husband is buying trafficked kids to maintain their public image as a caring family. Everett felt a spark of possibility. You think she'd help if she knew the truth? I think she'd be horrified. And I think she has enough political connections to cause serious problems for her husband and his associates. James leaned forward. The question is, how do we get to her without getting ourselves killed in the process? We don't go to her, Mabel said quietly. We make her come to us. Both men looked at her questioningly. The auction. Mrs. Brennan will be there. She always attends the high-profile events. Vincent Caldwell makes sure the respectable clients are visible, makes the whole thing look legitimate. Mabel's eyes were fierce with determination. If she could see what's really happening, if she could see the children being sold like livestock, she'd have to believe her own eyes. Everett finished. James was already shaking his head. It's too dangerous. Security at that event will be military grade, and you'd be walking into a room full of people who want you dead. What choice do we have? Everett stood and walked to the window, looking out at the mountains where storm clouds were gathering. Every day we wait, more children disappear. Elena gets sold to some rich family who thinks they're doing a good deed, and we lose any chance of exposing this network. There's another complication, James said reluctantly. Vincent Caldwell knows you're involved now. After last night's raid failed, he's not going to take any chances. My sources tell me he's hired professional security for the auction, ex-military contractors with orders to shoot first and ask questions later. How many? At least a dozen, and that's not counting local police who've been bought off or federal agents who've been compromised. James pulled out building schematics for the Grand Metropolitan Hotel. The auction is being held in the penthouse ballroom. Limited access, controlled elevators, no external windows large enough for entry. Everett studied the plans, his military training automatically identifying potential entry and exit points. What about service access? Kitchen, maintenance, laundry, all monitored. Caldwell's people have been planning this for months. Then we don't go through the building, Mabel said. We go through the guests. Explain. I still have the dress they made me wear for client meetings. Expensive, sophisticated, the kind of thing a wealthy woman would wear to a charity auction. Mabel's voice was steady, but Everett could see her hands shaking. I could blend in with the crowd, at least for a while. Absolutely not. Everett's response was immediate and non-negotiable. You're not walking back into that nightmare. I'm the only one who can identify all the players. I know which children are being trafficked and which adults are buyers versus legitimate guests. Mabel met his eyes with calm determination. And I'm the only one Elena will trust if we find her. If they recognize you, they'll try to kill me. I know." She pulled Elena's photograph from her pocket, studying her daughter's smiling face. "But Elena's been alone and scared for 3 months, thinking no one cares enough to come for her. I won't let her think that for one more day." James was making notes, his legal mind already working through the logistics. "If we're going to do this, we need backup, real backup, not local law enforcement." "Who do you have in mind?" "FBI agent Sarah Morrison, no relation to the detective. Different Morrison entirely. She's been investigating Bright Future for 2 years, trying to build a case that won't get thrown out by bought judges or blocked by corrupt senators. If she could get video evidence of the auction, witness testimony from Mabel, she'd need to be someone we can trust completely," Everett said. "She's solid. Lost her own sister to trafficking when they were teenagers, been hunting these networks ever since." James pulled out a phone. "I can have her here by tomorrow morning. And if she's compromised too, then we're all dead anyway. So, it won't matter." Outside, thunder rolled across the mountains as the storm moved closer. The sound reminded Everett of artillery fire, of nights in Afghanistan when he'd waited in foxholes for dawn to reveal whether his position was secure or surrounded. This felt like one of those nights. "There's something else," Mabel said quietly. "Something I haven't told you yet." "What now?" "Elena isn't the only child I know at that auction. There are others, maybe 20 or 30 kids, who've been held in different locations, all being brought together for this event." Her voice broke slightly. "Some of them are barely 5 years old. If we save Elena but leave the others, we save them all," Everett said firmly. "Or we die trying." Mabel looked at him with something that might have been love, if love could be mixed with so much grief and determination. "Your wife was right about you," she said. "You really are one of the good ones." Everett touched Sarah's ring, feeling the familiar weight of it against his chest. Somewhere in Denver, children were being prepared for sale to the highest bidder. In 3 days, Elena Cortez would be standing on an auction stage, clutching her stuffed rabbit and waiting for someone to save her. The plan they were discussing was suicide. The odds against them were astronomical. They were about to challenge a network with unlimited resources and political protection, using nothing but determination and righteous anger. Sarah would have approved completely. "Let's call Agent Morrison," Everett said. "It's time to crash a party." FBI agent Sarah Morrison arrived at the ranch before dawn, driving through the tail end of the storm in an unmarked sedan that had seen better days. She was smaller than Everett had expected, maybe 5'6", with graying brown hair and the kind of weathered face that spoke of too many sleepless nights chasing monsters. But her handshake was firm, and her eyes held the steady focus of someone who'd seen hell and refused to blink. "Mr. Chen briefed me on the situation," she said, accepting a cup of coffee in the kitchen. "I've been trying to build a case against this network for 2 years. Every time I get close, evidence disappears or witnesses suddenly develop memory problems." "How do we know you won't have the same problems?" Everett asked bluntly. "Because I don't report through normal channels anymore. After my sister Rachel was taken when she was 14, I learned that trusting the system gets children killed." Agent Morrison's voice was flat, professional, but Everett caught the undertone of personal pain. "I work with a small team of agents who've been personally affected by trafficking. We operate outside the normal bureaucracy. Vigilantes with badges. Patriots who remember what we swore to protect." She pulled out a tablet and showed them surveillance footage. "This is from last year's auction in Chicago. Same network, same methods, different venue." The video showed well-dressed people mingling at what looked like an elegant charity event. But in the background, Everett could see children standing quietly against the wall, too quiet, too still, their eyes holding the kind of emptiness that came from having hope beaten out of them. Mabel watched the footage with growing recognition. "I was there, in the kitchen, preparing refreshments. They kept the merchandise separate until the actual bidding started. Merchandise. Agent Morrison's jaw tightened. That's what they called my sister too. They spent the morning reviewing building plans, security protocols, and contingency strategies. The Grand Metropolitan Hotel was a fortress, 24 floors of steel and glass, with only 3 access points, all heavily monitored. The penthouse ballroom, where the auction would take place, was accessible only through a private elevator that required a special key card. The guest list is limited to verified clients, Agent Morrison explained. Everyone's been vetted, background checked, and personally vouched for by existing customers. Getting inside legitimately is impossible. What about getting inside illegitimately? Everett asked. That's where it gets interesting. Hotel security is provided by Blackwater Solutions, Vincent Caldwell's private military company. They've got the place locked down tighter than Fort Knox. You said it gets interesting. The head of hotel security is Marcus Webb, former Delta Force. He served 2 tours in Afghanistan, same time frame as you. Agent Morrison pulled up Webb's military record. Purple Heart, Bronze Star, exemplary service record until he was discharged for PTSD. Everett studied the photograph, a lean man with hard eyes and scars that told stories. What makes you think he'd help? Because his daughter was trafficked 3 years ago, taken from a shopping mall in Phoenix, never found. Agent Morrison's voice softened slightly. He doesn't know his current employer is connected to the same network that destroyed his family. You want me to convince him to betray his own operation? I want you to show him who he's really working for. While Agent Morrison coordinated with her team, Everett and Mabel prepared for the mission. She tried on the dress they'd forced her to wear during her captivity, a black cocktail dress that looked expensive but felt like a shroud. Her hands shook as she zipped it up, and Everett saw her fighting to maintain composure. You don't have to do this, he said. We can find another way. There is no other way. You know it, and I know it. Mabel stood in front of the mirror, transforming herself from a broken refugee into someone who could blend in with Denver's elite. Besides, Elena needs to see that I didn't give up on her. What if she doesn't remember you? 3 months is a long time for a child. She'll remember. Mabel pulled Elena's photograph from her purse, studying her daughter's face. A mother's love doesn't disappear just because evil men try to erase it. That evening, James Chen returned with final intelligence gathered from his contacts in Denver. The news wasn't encouraging. Security has been tripled, he reported. Vincent Caldwell is taking no chances after what happened here. Every guest will be escorted by armed guards. Every room will be monitored, and they've hired additional contractors to handle any disruptions. How many children? Mabel asked. 37, ages 5 to 14. They're being held in a secure facility outside the city until tomorrow night. James's voice was grim. Elena is confirmed to be among them. Where's the facility? Abandoned warehouse in an industrial district. Heavily guarded, no public access. But that might work in our favor if we can create enough chaos at the hotel. They'll have to move security resources away from the warehouse. Agent Morrison looked up from her tactical planning. You're talking about a coordinated assault on 2 separate locations. That's military-level complexity. Good thing we have military-level personnel, Everett said. We have 1 former soldier, 1 FBI agent, 1 lawyer, and 1 trafficking victim. Against a network with unlimited resources and professional security. Morrison's assessment was brutally honest. The smart play is to gather evidence, build a case, work through proper channels. How long would that take? 2 years, maybe 3, if we're lucky. Elena doesn't have 3 years, Mabel said quietly. None of those children do. Everett walked to the window, looking out at the mountains where Sarah was buried. The storm had passed, leaving the air clean and sharp, the kind of clarity that came after violence. He thought about his wife's journal, her belief that sometimes saving somebody else was how you saved yourself. Maybe she'd been wrong. Maybe sometimes you just saved them because it was the right thing to do, even if it destroyed you in the process. "I'm going to Denver," he said. "With or without backup." "You'll die," Agent Morrison said bluntly. "Probably. But those children will die too if nobody tries to help them." Everett turned from the window. "I've been running from responsibility for 10 years. I won't run from this." Mabel stood and moved to stand beside him. "I'm going too." "And me," James added reluctantly. "Someone needs to handle the legal paperwork when this is over." Agent Morrison studied the three of them, a grief-stricken rancher, a traumatized mother, and a lawyer who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Her expression showed what she thought of their chances. "This is insane," she said finally. "The plan has more holes than Swiss cheese. The odds are astronomical, and we're probably all going to end up dead or in federal prison." "Is that a no?" Everett asked. "That's a yes. But we do this my way, with my team, using proper tactical protocols." She pulled out her phone and started making calls. "If we're going to commit suicide, we might as well do it professionally." Over the next several hours, they refined the plan until it resembled something that might actually work. Agent Morrison's team would coordinate with Marcus Webb to create internal security gaps. Mabel would enter as a guest and locate the children during the cocktail hour. Everett would position himself to provide extraction support when the auction began. James would monitor communications and coordinate with local authorities who hadn't been compromised. "What about Senator Brennan's wife?" Everett asked. "She'll be seated in the VIP section, close to the auction stage. If we can get video of her reaction when she realizes what she's really witnessing." Agent Morrison's smile was grim. "Even a corrupt senator can't survive his wife testifying against him on national television. And if the plan fails, then a lot of children die, and we probably join them." She checked her weapon with practiced efficiency. "But at least we'll have tried." As they loaded equipment into vehicles for the drive to Denver, Mabel pulled Everett aside. In her hands was Elena's photograph, creased and worn from constant handling. "If something happens to me tomorrow, nothing's going to happen to you. If it does, promise me you'll make sure Elena knows I never stopped looking for her. Promise me she'll know how much I love her." Everett took the photograph, studying the little girl's gap-toothed smile and bright eyes. Somewhere in Denver, that same child was probably lying awake in a locked room, clutching a worn, stuffed rabbit and wondering if anyone cared enough to save her. "I promise," he said. "But you're going to tell her yourself." As they drove through the Montana night toward Denver, Everett touched Sarah's ring one last time. Tomorrow they would walk into hell, armed with nothing but determination and a desperate hope that love could triumph over evil. It would have to be enough. Because for 37 children waiting in the darkness, it was the only hope they had. The Grand Metropolitan Hotel rose into the Denver sky like a monument to wealth and power, its glass facade reflecting the city lights in patterns that reminded Everett of broken promises. He sat in the passenger seat of Agent Morrison's surveillance van, watching well-dressed guests arrive for what they believed was an exclusive charity auction. "Webb's in position," Agent Morrison reported through her earpiece. He confirmed visual on 37 children being moved into the service elevator 20 minutes ago. Everett's jaw tightened. Somewhere in that building, Elena Cortez was preparing to be sold to the highest bidder. "Mabel's status?" he asked. "Just entered the main lobby. Video confirms she's unrecognized so far." Morrison adjusted her equipment. "Her cover identity is solid, wealthy widow from Phoenix, interested in private adoption. Caldwell's people vetted the background I created." Through the surveillance feed, Everett watched Mabel walk across the marble lobby in her black cocktail dress. She moved with practiced elegance, every inch the sophisticated woman she was pretending to be. Only someone who knew what to look for would notice the slight tremor in her hands or the way her eyes constantly scanned for threats. "How's she holding up?" he asked. "Like a woman walking into her own execution, who's determined to take her killers with her." Morrison's voice held grudging admiration. "I've seen seasoned agents with less composure." The hotel's penthouse ballroom had been transformed into an elegant venue that could have hosted any legitimate charity event. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables arranged in concentric circles around a small stage. Wealthy couples mingled with champagne and canapes, discussing art, politics, and business with the casual confidence of people who'd never wanted for anything. "Target identified," Morrison said. Senator Brennan and his wife just entered the VIP section. Everett studied Margaret Brennan through the telephoto lens. She was smaller than he'd expected, with silver hair and the kind of gentle face that belonged to someone who genuinely cared about helping children. She wore a simple blue dress and pearl necklace, her smile warm as she greeted other guests. "She has no idea," he said. "That's what makes her dangerous to them," Morrison replied. "If she realized what her husband has been doing—" "Vincent Caldwell." Approaching Mabel's position came Webb's voice through their comms. "She's about to make contact." Everett watched as Caldwell glided across the room toward Mabel, his silver hair and expensive suit making him look like a successful businessman rather than a monster who trafficked children. His smile was predatory as he extended his hand to her. "Mrs. Rodriguez, I presume? Welcome to our little gathering." Mabel's response was perfectly controlled. "Mr. Caldwell, thank you for including me. Your reputation for discretion precedes you." "Discretion is essential in our business. Shall we discuss your particular needs?" Even through the surveillance equipment, Everett could see the effort it took for Mabel to maintain her composure. This was the man who had stolen her daughter, who had kept her chained in a basement for 3 months. Now she was shaking his hand and smiling as if they were old friends. "I'm looking for a very specific type of child," she said. "Young enough to adapt, but old enough to appreciate the opportunities I can provide." "Ah, a woman who knows what she wants. I believe I have exactly what you're looking for." Caldwell gestured toward the stage. "The presentations will begin shortly. I think you'll be quite impressed with our selection." As Caldwell moved away to greet other guests, Webb's voice crackled through the comm. "Children are being staged in the prep room. Security is lighter than expected. They're confident in their perimeter." "Any sign of Elena?" Everett asked. "Negative, but the kids are being kept separate until their individual presentations. She could be in any of the holding rooms." Morrison checked her watch. "Auction starts in 15 minutes. Once it begins, security will be focused on the ballroom. That's our window." Everett watched as servers began clearing tables and guests moved to their seats. The casual cocktail atmosphere was shifting to something more formal, more ceremonial. Margaret Brennan sat in the front row beside her husband, her face bright with anticipation for what she believed would be a celebration of children finding loving homes. "Movement in the prep area," Webb reported, first child being escorted to the stage. Through the surveillance feed, Everett saw a little boy, maybe 6 years old, being led by 2 women in elegant dresses toward a side door. The child moved like a sleepwalker, his eyes empty of hope or resistance. "Jesus," Morrison whispered. "He's been drugged." "Sedatives," Mabel's voice came through her hidden microphone. "They give them something to keep them compliant during the presentations, makes them easier to handle." Caldwell took the stage, his voice carrying easily through the room's sound system. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us for this very special evening. As always, your generosity will change lives, providing loving homes for children who have known only hardship and loss." The applause was genuine, enthusiastic. These people truly believed they were participating in something noble. "Our first presentation," Caldwell continued, "is Miguel, age 6, exceptionally bright, bilingual, excellent health records." The boy was led onto the stage like a show dog, turning slowly so the audience could examine him from all angles. Bidding started at $50,000. "This is it," Morrison said. Once they bring out Elena, we move. Webb, are you ready? Ready. Security feeds will go dark on your signal. Everett checked his weapon one final time and started toward the hotel entrance. Somewhere in that building, a little girl was waiting for someone to save her. He intended to make sure that someone was him. Everett moved through the hotel's service corridors like a ghost, following the route Marcus Webb had provided. The head of security had been horrified to learn his employer was connected to the same network that had destroyed his family, and his cooperation had opened doors that should have been impenetrable. "Elena's on deck." Webb's voice crackled through the earpiece. "They're preparing her for presentation number 7. 7? Morrison's voice was tense. "How many more children before?" 6. Miguel just sold for 200,000. They're bringing out a girl named Sophia next. Everett reached the prep area's service entrance and peered through the reinforced glass window. Children stood in a line against the far wall, each one flanked by handlers in elegant evening wear who looked more like prison guards than caregivers. The kids ranged in age from maybe 5 to 14, all of them wearing clean clothes and blank expressions. And there, 7th in line, stood Elena Cortez. She was smaller than Everett had expected, thin in the way of children who hadn't been eating properly. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail, and she wore a yellow dress that would have been pretty if not for the circumstances. In her arms she clutched a worn, stuffed rabbit conejito, the magical protector that could chase away bad dreams. "Target confirmed," Everett whispered into his comm. "She's here." In the ballroom, Caldwell's voice continued its obscene salesmanship. "Sophia, age 9, exceptional artistic abilities, fluent in 3 languages. Bidding will start at 75,000. Everett watched as a girl barely older than Elena was led onto the stage. Through the surveillance feed, he could see Margaret Brennan's face beginning to change from anticipation to confusion. The child's vacant stare and mechanical movements were starting to penetrate her assumptions about what she was witnessing. "Something's wrong," he heard her whisper to her husband. "That little girl looks sedated." Senator Brennan's response was sharp and immediate. "Keep your voice down, Margaret. These children have been through trauma. The medications help them adjust." But doubt had been planted. Everett could see it in her posture, the way she leaned forward to study the child more closely. "Mabel's moving," Morrison reported. "She's positioning herself near the stage." Through his earpiece, Everett could hear the auction continuing. Sophia sold for $160,000 to a couple from Dallas who looked genuinely pleased with their acquisition. The next child was a boy named Carlos, then 2 sisters being sold as a package deal. "Elena's up next," Webb reported. "They're moving her to the staging area." Everett watched as handlers approached Elena. She didn't resist when they took her hands, but she held Conejito tighter, the stuffed rabbit, her only anchor to the life that had been stolen from her. "Wait." Morrison's voice was urgent. "Something's happening in the ballroom." Margaret Brennan had stood up, her face pale with growing realization. "Michael, these aren't adoption proceedings. These children are being sold." "Sit down," the senator hissed, grabbing her arm. "You don't understand what you're seeing." "I understand perfectly." Her voice was rising, carrying across the ballroom. "These children are being trafficked and you're part of it." The room went silent. Caldwell's smooth facade cracked for the first time as he realized his most prominent client's wife was about to expose everything. "Security to the VIP section," he said quietly into his headset. "We have a situation." "That's our cue," Morrison said. "Webb, kill the lights." The ballroom plunged into darkness as emergency lighting kicked in. In the confusion that followed, Morrison and her team moved through the main entrance while Everett breached the prep area. "Elena," he called out as handlers scrambled in the dim emergency lighting. "Elena Cortez." The little girl's head snapped up at the sound of her name. For a moment, confusion clouded her features. She'd been drugged like the others, but not as heavily since she was next on the schedule. "Who are you?" she asked in a small voice, clutching Conejito closer. I'm a friend of your mother's. Mabel sent me to take you home. Mama. The word came out broken, filled with desperate hope. Mama's here? She's here, and she's been looking for you every day since they took you. Everett knelt down to Elena's level, keeping his voice gentle despite the chaos erupting around them. We're going to get you out of here, but I need you to be very brave. Can you do that? Elena nodded, tears starting to spill down her cheeks. Is Mama really here? She's really here, and she never stopped loving you, never stopped fighting to find you. Through the emergency lighting, Everett could see security forces converging on their position. In the ballroom, gunfire had erupted as Morrison's team engaged Caldwell's men. Margaret Brennan's screams echoed through the hotel as she finally understood the full scope of her husband's crimes. This way, Everett said, lifting Elena in his arms. She was lighter than she should have been, all sharp angles and hollow spaces where proper meals should have filled her out. As they moved toward the emergency exit, Elena looked up at him with eyes that held too much pain for someone so young. Will you tell Mama I kept Conejito safe? She asked. I didn't let them take him away. You can tell her yourself, Everett promised. Very soon. The battle for the Grand Metropolitan Hotel was just beginning, but Elena Cortez was going home. 6 months later, Everett stood on the front porch of the ranch house, watching Elena chase butterflies through Sarah's old flower garden. The little girl had filled out in the months since Denver, her cheeks round with proper nutrition and her eyes bright with the kind of joy that children were meant to have. Conejito sat on the porch swing beside him, worn and patched, but still on duty whenever thunderstorms rolled through the Montana sky. She's getting stronger every day, Mabel said, joining him with 2 cups of coffee. The haunted look had faded from her eyes, replaced by something Everett had learned to recognize as peace. Doc Henderson says her nightmares are almost gone. What about yours? Mabel smiled, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her since that night in the barn. Getting better. Hard to have nightmares when you're too busy planning a future. The future had taken shape gradually, like a photograph developing in Sarah's old dark room. After the trials ended, Vincent Caldwell sentenced to life without parole, Senator Brennan facing federal charges for conspiracy and trafficking, 37 children returned to their families or placed in legitimate care. Mabel and Elena had nowhere else to go. The ranch had become their refuge, then their sanctuary, and finally their home. Elena's laughter echoed across the meadow as she discovered a butterfly that seemed willing to land on her outstretched finger. She was speaking to it in the mixture of English and Spanish that came naturally to her now, telling it stories about magical rabbits and brave cowboys who rescued little girls from monsters. "Everett," she called out, waving him over. "Come see, I think this one likes me." He walked down the porch steps, marveling at how easily she'd learned to trust again. Children were resilient in ways that constantly amazed him, able to heal from wounds that would have destroyed most adults. Elena had been in therapy for months, working through the trauma with a specialist Doc Henderson had recommended. But it was love and stability that had done the real healing. "That's a painted lady butterfly," he told her, kneeling down to examine the orange and black wings. "They migrate thousands of miles to get here. Pretty brave little creature." "Like Mama," Elena said matter-of-factly. "She was brave enough to find me." "Like your mama," he agreed. Agent Morrison had kept in touch, sending updates on the continuing investigation. The network they'd exposed in Denver had tentacles reaching across 12 states and into 2 foreign countries. The evidence gathered during the hotel raid, particularly Margaret Brennan's testimony and the surveillance footage of the auction, had blown the case wide open. Dozens of children had been recovered, hundreds of arrests had been made, and the illegal adoption pipeline had been permanently disrupted. Justice, Sarah would have called it, but for Everett, justice was simpler and more personal. It was Elena's laughter in his wife's flower garden. It was Mabel humming lullabies in the kitchen while she cooked dinner. It was the way this old house had come alive again, filled with voices and warmth and the sound of running feet, on the hardwood floors. "There's something we need to tell you," Mabel said that evening, as they sat around the dinner table. Elena was busy feeding pieces of cornbread to the stray cat that had appeared 2 weeks ago, another lost soul that had found its way to their door. "What's that?" "Elena and I have been talking, and we've made a decision." Mabel reached across the table to take his hand. "We want to stay here permanently, not as guests, not as refugees, but as family." Everett felt his throat tighten with emotion. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure," Elena piped up, grinning at him with cornbread crumbs on her cheek. "This is where Conejito likes it best. He told me so. Well, if Conejito approves, then it's settled." Everett squeezed Mabel's hand, feeling Sarah's ring warm against his chest. "I can't think of anything that would make me happier." Later that night, after Elena had been tucked into bed with Conejito standing guard against bad dreams, Everett and Mabel sat on the front porch, watching stars appear in the Montana sky. The same stars Sarah had once pointed out, telling stories about cowboys finding their way home. "Do you think she would have approved?" Mabel asked quietly. "Your wife, I mean. Of us being here, changing her house?" Everett touched the ring hanging around his neck, feeling Sarah's presence in the evening air like a warm breeze. "She would have loved you both. And she would have said that houses are meant to be filled with life, not preserved like museums. Even this much life." "Elena gets pretty loud when she's excited. Especially that much life," he smiled, remembering how Sarah had always talked about filling their home with children's voices. She'd gotten her wish, just not in the way either of them had expected. Sarah believed that love multiplies when you share it, that there's always room for one more at the table, one more bed in the house, one more heart in the family. A shooting star streaked across the sky, bright and brief and beautiful. Mabel made a wish, closing her eyes and pressing her hands together like a child. "What did you wish for?" Everett asked. "That Elena will always be this happy, that she'll grow up knowing she's safe and loved and free." Mabel opened her eyes. "What about you?" Everett looked through the window at Elena's room, where a small nightlight cast gentle shadows on the walls. A little girl slept peacefully in Sarah's old sewing room, clutching a magical rabbit that had kept her safe through the darkest time of her life. "I wish that Sarah knows," he said quietly, "that she can see how her love kept spreading even after she was gone. That saving somebody else really did save me too." In the distance, a coyote called across the valley, and another answered. The sound had once made him feel lonely, but now it just sounded like family calling family home. Some places hold too many ghosts to ever feel like home again, but sometimes, with enough love and courage and second chances, they become home for entirely new reasons. The ranch was alive again, filled with voices and laughter, and the endless possibility of tomorrow. Sarah would have been proud.